Good day, ladies and gentlemen, and invited guests. It's a wonderful privilege for me to be here today, and I'm sure you're going to have a wonderful dinner. You're going to enjoy celebrating the award winners, and hopefully we can have some grand conversation. I'm not here today to deliver a motivational speech, nor am I here to give a lecture. I'm merely here to share some observations with you, hopefully which will provoke some thought and in turn provide some encouragement. In short, I'm here for a simple conversation. For those of you who are my age or older, you may recall a prescribed reading book called Cry the Beloved Country. This was the story and lament of South Africa at the height of oppression and apartheid. A difficult time for our country. Many people would argue that it's time for Cry the Beloved Country too, that South Africa is at a tipping point, that we've reached a crossroads or a junction, and depending which route we take, we could end up down a road to destruction or a road to resurrection. However, it is a function of choices that we make and actions that we take. Over the last few months, I've spent time traveling the country. I've spoken to heads of universities, deans of business schools, professors, CEOs and chairmen, and of course, I've spoken to the everyday guy at braais and at dinner parties. And the conversation has been consistent, although somewhat disturbing, depressing, with a sense of hopelessness about it. These conversations all go around common themes: bankrupt SOEs, load shedding, poor education systems, state capture, persistent unemployment, crime and corruption, failing economies, quite frankly, conversations about a country in trouble and a country in despair. But is this it? Is this to be our destiny? Is this to be our truth? Fortunately, from my perspective, the answer is no. That is only part of the story. There is an alternative narrative, a more complete narrative. The media, of course, doesn't help because they don't sell papers by spreading good news, nor do the TV stations get ratings. However, we as individuals must be able to see the good with the bad. Of course, we have problems, but we've also made remarkable progress since 1994. There is tremendous good in this country, and there are very many positives to reflect on in South Africa. As engineers, would you ignore half the data? Of course you wouldn't. This wouldn't make any sense if you were working on a project. So let's just pause and examine some of the good news. And to do this, we're going to contrast 1994 with information from 2016 and 2018, all drawn from the IRR, which is the Institute of Race Relations, the IMF, the World Bank, and other reputable institutions. When we look at the economy, there are very many positives. Real GDP has doubled to 1.3 trillion, and per capita it's gone up 133%. Disposable income per capita has gone up almost 50%. Inflation has halved to 4.5. Our budget deficit is almost halved to -3.9. Our government bond yield, which is a reflection of the risk inherent in investing in a country, has almost halved to 8.8%. Our employment, notwithstanding at unprecedented levels amongst blacks, has more than doubled, and notwithstanding affirmative action amongst white people has almost doubled. There are also very many positives from an educational perspective. Our matric pass rate has almost doubled to 380,000. Now, I know many of you will comment that we've reduced the pass level to ensure that the pass rate goes up, and this may well be true. Nonetheless, 380,000 is not a number to be sneered at, and last year the number was in fact 537,000. So notwithstanding the fact that some would be critical of these numbers, they are nonetheless hugely positive and constantly increasing. Just to give you a startling number, in 1960, the great number of people, black people, to pass matric was 128. That's not 128,000, that's 128 black people in total passed matric in 1960. From a university enrollment point of view, this is more than doubled to 808,000, and last year was in fact 897,000. Amongst blacks, the proportion has gone up from 46% to 72% of that 897,000. And last year was in fact 76%. A huge shift. Our SET students, the E obviously designating engineers, has tripled. The number of registered nurses has gone up by almost 50%. And notwithstanding the flight of skills, qualified GPs have almost doubled, and specialists have gone up from 3,900 to 5,000. From a social point of view, there are also tremendous positives. The number of formal dwellings has more than doubled. Access to piped water has more than doubled. The use of electricity for lights and cooking has in fact tripled. Flush toilets more than doubled. LSM 123, which represents the poorest of our society, has fallen from 38.8% of the population to 10%. And to put that into perspective, let's talk about the number. At roughly 40% of the 1994 population of 40 million people, that represents 16 million people were living in LSMs 1 to 3. Currently, it's 10% of 60, which gives you a number of 6 million. So the number has fallen from 16 million to 6 million. Had it stayed at the 38.8, that would now have been 24 million. So it gives you just a smidgen of an insight into the huge progress that's been made. Vehicle ownership, which is the mark of the middle class, has almost doubled to 6.9 million, whilst new HIV infections have halved. Extreme poverty amongst blacks has more than halved from 51% to 19%, and amongst coloureds it's down 2/3. Our murder rate, while still horrific at 34 per 100,000, has in fact halved from circa 68 to 70 per 100,000 in 1994. And of course, we have a strong constitution and an independent judiciary. And yes, we may chuckle at times that dockets are lost and trials and cases take too long and we have some strange decisions. But let's never forget that this is a constitution which enabled the president to be removed from office, and an independent judiciary which ensured that he could be brought to trial, was found guilty, and was in fact incarcerated. Now contrast this with a great icon of democracy, the United States, where a certain Donald Trump rode roughshod over the Constitution and still makes a mockery of the judiciary as they tap dance around whether they should or shouldn't indict him for insurrection. Change is difficult. It was never going to be easy. Making a meaningful difference to the country as it was in 1994 was always going to be a difficult task, and its success is never going to be a straight line. How many of you have led a turnaround? Now, I built a career on turnarounds, and it's not that easy to do. A small company can take between a year or two, a medium-sized company 2 to 4 years, a large company can take anywhere between 4 and 10 years, and then with some really, really hard work. Niccolo Machiavelli put it best when he said, "There is nothing more difficult to take in hand, more perilous to conduct, or more uncertain in its success than to take the lead in the introduction of a new order of things." And to be sure, bringing about a new order of things is exactly what we were trying to do in this country. But it was never going to be easy, and nor was it going to be a straight line to success. Quo vadis, or where to from here? It's a moment of great magnitude in South Africa, a time when choices must be made and action must be taken. If good is to prevail, then South African men and women of conviction, integrity, and judgment need to take action. And you are these men and women. As individuals and collectively, we need to make choices, and even more importantly, we need to take action. So what are we to do, you might ask? There's 6 very simple things. None of these are new revelations, but are merely a reminder. Importantly, they are simple things that each one of us is capable of doing. First of these is, let's change our perspective. How you see the world impacts how you act. What do you see when you look at South Africa? If you look at the picture on the right, do you see the old haggard lady, or do you see the beautiful young lady with a plume in her hair? Your perspective of your world impacts your actions. Perspective matters because it can mobilize or cripple us. If you consider the ladder of life, wherever you stand on that ladder, whichever rung you find yourself on, if you look up, you'll see the rich, the famous, the powerful, the successful, and perhaps envy them and reflect on your woes. The traffic jams because of traffic lights that are out of order, coming home in the dark because of load shedding. However, take a moment to pause and look down the ladder and see the African refugee, the Yemeni asylum camp, asylum seekers crossing the channel who die by their hundreds, or the typhoon victim in an Indian village who has nothing but a mud hut or a reed mat and a few personal possessions, and it all gets washed away in the typhoon. When all we do is look up without perspective, we despair and wallow in self-pity. Consider whether you would rather be confronted with the issues in the top two pictures, or whether you would rather be the individual in the bottom three pictures. I don't want to trivialize our issues or our challenges. They are real and multiple. But hold a malnourished Yemeni refugee toddler in your arms and you will soon gain perspective. And once we have perspective, we are more likely able to mobilize, which brings us to point number 2. Take accountability. It's easy to be the Monday morning quarterback, sitting on the sidelines, passing critique and ridicule, non-stop commentary on how bad things are. Those shoulda, coulda, woulda people. He should have done this, he could have done that, I would have done something different. But perhaps we should stop criticizing and groaning and start participating. Perhaps we need to get on the field and play and make a contribution. Theodore Roosevelt made the point, it is not the critic who counts, nor the man who points out how the strong man stumbles or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust, sweat, and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming. But the one who does actually strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasms, great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows the end, the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails whilst daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat. We can choose to be one of those who sit at brows and criticize, bemoaning everything as we slowly circle the drain, or we can decide to do something. Who me, you might ask? The task is so great, you may say. What can I possibly do? But we all have something to offer. Skills, expertise, knowledge, experience, money, time, or passion. But with so much to do, you might say, where are we to start? Well, point number 3 says, focus on the things you can control. You may not be able to solve world hunger, but we all have something to offer. Depending on where your skills lies or your passions, if they be in education, volunteer at the local school. If you're concerned with crime or have any skills in that area, join the CPF. If it be social welfare, join a not-for-profit charitable organization and do it pro bono. If the aged or the youth are of areas of concern for you or where you have skills, there are many age-old homes who will welcome you and many youth needing a mentor. If it be children, volunteer at the local orphanage, or if violence against women is your field of endeavor, then work at a women's shelter. Whilst it might sound frightening and daunting, it's important that we just get started. And this will require of us to be bold. Bringing us to point number 4. Although the tasks may be daunting, we need to get started. Nothing really worth doing is ever easy. Goethe said, whatever you can do or dream you can, begin it. Boldness is genius, power, and magic in it. And the key words there are begin it. It's not only extraordinary people who can do amazing things. Each one of us has the capacity to do these things. And besides, even if it did require amazing people, each one of you have the extraordinary within you. Let's have a look at some ordinary people who did some extraordinary things by daring to be bold. Malala Yousafzai took on the Taliban and won the Nobel Peace Prize. Captain Tom Moore, who at the age of 99 walked 100 kilometers around his garden during COVID lockdowns to raise money for health services. An exercise for which he was knighted by the Queen and sadly died a few weeks before his 100th birthday. But let's look closer to home, where there are extraordinary people and groups of people doing amazing things. By way of example, there's a group of people who run a school, and this school serves the poorest. The prerequisite for attendance is that they are check dwellers from the informal settlements, the poorest of the poor. Their parents need to be existing on social grant of government. And in those top two pictures on the right, you can see the young girls and the homes they come from. Now, the school doesn't only provide free education, it provides it at private school standards. It also understands that these kids have no way of getting to school, and often when they do, are hungry. So it picks them up by bus in the morning and drops them off in the evening. It provides them with breakfast, a mid-morning snack, lunch, and an afternoon snack. And after school provides tutoring to help with homework. The school also understands the complexities of matric and have gone out of their way to make sure that they succeed. Consequently, when it comes to matric exam time, they arrange pop-up dormitories in their schools and school classrooms and halls, where kids enter at the first exam and spend the entire exam time at this dormitory, allowing them to study peacefully, quietly, as often at home they're confronted by overcrowded homes, drug addiction, alcohol addiction. The consequence of this is that this school consistently delivers a 100% pass rate with an 80% university entrance. But I'd like to focus for one moment on one particular individual, Jacqueline Hansen. She's the mother to Denisha Hansen, the two ladies pictured center at the bottom. You can see in the background, the home they live in is a shack with a grill gate as a door and plastic bags to keep out the rain. Now, Jacqueline, notwithstanding she lives on a social grant, works at the school as a cleaner. And on a weekly basis, she works at the soup kitchen to assist those who, wait for it, are less fortunate than she is. And to put the cherry on the top, she does it pro bono as a volunteer. We can all be a Jacqueline Hansen, but as you tackle these ventures, there is an essential ingredient you will need, which Jacqueline has in spades. That is hope. Rumi, the Persian poet, said, amidst every wreck is the hope of a treasure. Now, the argument goes that crisis brings opportunity. If this is true, given all our crises, our wrecks, the opportunity and hopes for treasure must be absolutely abundant. And this is particularly true for engineers. Our current crises, plus that of population growth, urbanization, environmental problems, all provides the hope of a treasure, creating an opportunity and demand like never before for innovation in and the application, supply and storage of power, be it fossil fuel, hydro, solar, nuclear, bioenergy, or those yet to be discovered. We require new infrastructure, dams, bridges, roads, wind and solar farms, sanitation, reticulation, and of course, the new technologies of robotics and AI. Many huge industries and companies have been born of crises. In the early and mid-1980s, there was no huge security industry. This is an industry which formed companies like Springbok Patrols, ADT, and many others, all who grew out of the security crisis of the mid-1980s to early 90s. Likewise, medical aid companies were spawned out of crisis. In the early 1990s, there was no discovery, or a very small discovery. Discovery as a medical aid group blossomed because of crises. And today, it's a company which is globally acclaimed, and its vitality program is run in many continents around the world. Our private education system is another example of this, where concerned citizens, parents, teachers, and headmasters in the early 90s were concerned by the crisis in education, and as a consequence started private schools. This became 2 and 3 and 4 as more and more parents, teachers, and other interested parties opened new schools. Today, we have companies like Eduvos, Curo, and Advitech, who are huge suppliers of private education. The insurance company has bred companies like Outsurance, who are great innovators. And even the micro-lending industry didn't really exist unless you were a furniture retailer providing credit to people to buy furniture. But the micro-lending industry run by the banking sector today grew out of the crisis to provide people with money. Hope is vital. Without it, we have no cause to act. Fortunately, there is much to be hopeful for in South Africa. We just have to be open to see it and not allow ourselves to be overwhelmed by the bad. Not surround ourselves with naysayers and not fall into the trap of ourselves being naysayers. As you embark on your endeavors, it's not always going to be easy. You may find you struggling to do so, which brings us to point number 6. If you find you struggling, do something good for someone else. A random act of kindness for a stranger. Recently, I was sitting at a coffee shop, and across the road, there were 2 homeless people. One was seated outside a supermarket, and a few shops down, another one. The one outside the supermarket was a busker and was singing for a few coins. As I watched people go by, I noticed that the one homeless person, not the busker, got up, walked a few stores to where the busker was sitting, took his hat with him, and from his hat drew a few of his own coins and popped them into the busker's hat, who hadn't been enjoying much luck that morning. Truly remarkable, and actually leaves one quite speechless. To close, I look around this room and I see a group of extraordinary people who are in a very privileged position and therefore able to make a huge difference. We have a unique opportunity. We live in an extraordinary country, in an extraordinary time, and we can truly build something extraordinary. All it takes is you. Thank you and good luck.